Joining me in the lounge to talk about home educating a preschool child is Marinda Erwee and Brenda Mhlungu. Marinda is a trained educator with more than 11 years' experience in the government and private sector. She ran an early childhood development franchise and her own playgroup for 10 years and was part of the BabyGym Institute for the past 13 years. Brenda taught for many years at various preschools in some of South Africa's poorest communities. She started a community-based childminder program through which mothers were equipped to care for their own and others' preschool children. She is also the founding member of a private preschool in Johannesburg. It is a pleasure to have two such knowledgeable guests. Marinda, when we talk of early childhood development, what age range are we looking at? And at what age should we start focusing on early childhood development?
Good morning, Anel. So lovely to be part of the talks this morning. We feel very privileged to be on Homeschool Lounge. The period referred to for ECD is basically the period between birth and 9 years of age. So it isn't just the preschool years like many people think. Many people even think it's just the first 3 years. But it's what happens in those 3 years that counts. So the reason why early childhood development is so important is because that is the time when the brain is the most malleable and adaptable. So the foundation period for physical, emotional, and intellectual development and when the brain unfolds in sequence falls during this time period. So when you begin with like early childhood development, you're basically beginning already when your baby's born because you're connecting with your baby. So when you're holding your little baby in your arms and you're looking down, you're forming a connection, which is interpersonal relationships. So it begins actually before birth, pre-birth, but when we're talking about stimulation out of utero, not in utero, it begins basically the moment your baby's born and you connect with it for the first time. And then it's an ongoing development is ongoing throughout life. So specifically in the first 9 years of life, we like to look at development in a perspective of concrete versus symbolic. So if learning and experiences are hands-on and concrete, when it's in the beginning, like from birth, it should follow sort of an 80% to 20% principle. So 80% being more hands-on, concrete, engaged learning, and 20% less so, maybe reading stories, and that would fall into that category for a little child. And then as they gradually grow, by the time they reach the age of 9, they should be more ready for learning more on a symbolic level, 80%, and a more hands-on development, 20%. So the problem is, though, is that interruptions in this developmental phase could lead to delays, and you have to keep that in mind with each child individually. Just remember, too, that children who are stimulated, lots of stimulation, will lead to many neural pathways in the brain being formed. Less stimulation will lead to less neural pathways in the brain being formed. And the brain relies on three-dimensional hands-on concrete experiences to be able to work two-dimensionally later on a symbolic, to decipher symbolic learning later on. Brenda's going to share a little bit with us about her vision and what's happening in the where she's heading in the townships with this vision.
Thank you, Anel. Yes, this is a very exciting time for me. I feel like it's just happened at the right time, where I'd love to share about what we're doing at the moment in the township with ECD. We've realized that people in the township, some people in the township can't afford to send their kids to preschool. So we've started a toy library in a squatter area. We started a toy library where we've bought a container and we've converted it into a toy library with educational toys. And we have field workers that go out and identify the families that can't afford to send their children to preschool. And these children between the age of 3 and 5 years old, they come twice a week to the toy library, and they have access to the educational toys. They have access to puzzles and blocks and Lego. And we also do some reading with them afterwards.
That sounds like a great initiative. Now, parents are often told to let their young ones play, but what kind of play is best for early childhood development?
Age-appropriate, high-intensity, fun, three-dimensional, hands-on, experience-based, where all the senses are involved. That's a mouthful. Play is the best kind of play you can do for your little one. So it's very, very much a delicate balance between concepts that you want to teach them and where the child wants to go. So it's also important at this age to follow them in their interests and gauge in their interests and develop the things that you want to develop incidentally through what they are interested in. So a more child-led approach is definitely the way to go. And then, so use what they are interested in to teach the concepts that you see as important, just to summarize, and then make the experiences hands-on rather than two-dimensional and flat. Unfortunately, these days, I find that more and more in the primary school years, in the pre-primary school years, more and more parents are going towards paper-driven tasks. And that is actually a big no-no, because a paper-driven, two-dimensional, flat task can never, ever take the place of a three-dimensional hands-on experience. And Dr. Melody de Jaard has got a wonderful way how she put it in her book, Play, Learn, Grow. And I'd actually just like to read it to you, because it really actually just brings it all home. So unfortunately, the less a parent or caregiver understands the mind and heart of a child younger than 6, the more they seem to insist on teaching children to read and write. It is as though they believe a colouring in book has more value than blank paper, and a file full of worksheets can replace the learning value of one day at the zoo. So once again, that just reiterates that colouring in actually doesn't have that much value except teaching a child to colour between the lines. And worksheets also don't have the same value as an experience. So it's very, very important to make your learning and play experience-based. Children have a natural curiosity to learn. And then if we're looking at absent screen-based learning, screen time has got its place. But if the use of an app or video, etc., is not interactive, in other words, what I would recommend is that you pause when they are using an app or maybe a video that they're watching or a story that they're watching, and interact with what needs to be done. So if their bodies are not moving when they are actually doing, if learning is passive, it isn't going to have much value later on, because in the younger years, these days children seem to be born to know how to use a remote, but that does not mean they should. When you replace 3D experiences with two-dimensional screen time, it is a long-term recipe for disaster, especially if it's too much. So it's always about balance. In the younger years, children need to move while they're learning, because movement is what wires the brain. They are only expected to be able to sit still and engage in activities properly from about the age of 7. So that's like the grade 1 year. And to sit still and straight and concentrate on what they're doing. When we introduce too much passive learning at a young age, then the muscles do not have sufficient time to develop. Often children then present with low muscle tone, as concentration goes to the muscles first. What then happens is that the child, in a more formal educational setting, could display symptoms of ADD or concentration issues. This is due to the fact that concentration goes to the muscles first, and their muscles may not be strong enough to keep their bodies upright because they had too much passive screen time learning when they were younger. So limit screen time and engage in what they are learning during this time. I would hence not say that absent educational online games really count as productive play unless you make it interactive. And then I think Brenda's going to chat about toys.
With my kids, when they were younger at home, I used a lot of things that were around the house for them to play with. For example, I would take a basin and fill it with water with some sunlight liquid and make bubble water, and then I would use my recycle Flora container, my yogurt containers, my plastic cups, and my children will play for hours with water play, just playing with the different containers that we used around the house. And then also they enjoyed making paper mache, where I would take newspaper and put some water in with some glue, and we will mold different things. So for example, if we're talking about fruit, we will make different fruits with the paper mache, put it out in the sun. Once it's hardened, then they would paint they would paint the apple red, then we'll bring in colors, color the banana yellow. So we'll talk about the different colors of the fruit, and then my kids will paint the fruit as well. There's times where I would just take out a whole lot of paper and different crayons and kokies, and have the girls sit on the floor, and then they would just draw. So that is also one of the activities that they would do with drawing as well.
Brenda, I want to ask you this question. It was on a Facebook group the other day where a mom asked, if I let my child play with a sensory bucket, but I have 2 different ages, do I give them the same bucket, or do they each have their own bucket?
I would say they would each have their own bucket if they are older. So for example, I was looking after my 2-year-old nephew not so long ago, and he's 2. So in his bucket, he had a lot of big toys, like big containers for him to pour. It was easier for him to pour the water into bigger containers than I would have. So the size was different because of his age. So for an older child, I would put more smaller containers, so that it helps them to concentrate more. It's more it's more interesting for them. It's easier for it would be very easy for an older child to have big containers in a bucket, because then that's easy for them to do. So I would put activities that are more interesting and harder for an older child. And also with the kids, with the age difference, you've got to be careful that you don't put little things that the little child can put in their mouth or stuff in their nose, which is not safe. So you've also got to think of safety issues with the age groups.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What are the skills that a child should acquire before grade 1 or around the age of 7?
Now, the focus of the grade R year is a transitional shift from more concrete hands-on learning to more symbolic learning. So that is actually the purpose of the grade R year. It's actually there to be a bridge between concrete learning and symbolic learning that is required in the formal schooling sector. But too much paperwork or symbolic learning, like I've said before, at too young an age has a negative impact on learning later on. And like I've said before as well, sadly, many schools and parents and teachers place too much emphasis on paper-driven tasks and too little importance on age-appropriate concrete learning experiences. So I just want to mention here a little bit, the government have been working on the new Birth to 4 curriculum. I'm privileged to know some of the authors of this curriculum, and I know where their heart is, and they really did have the young child concrete learning and brain development in mind. So that's a real plus and positive. So the new Birth to 4 curriculum clearly outlines hands-on experiences for learning and has brain development in mind. So the grade 00 and R also keep this development in mind to a degree. The most important thing, to be honest, is that a child has had enough time to move freely and build strong muscles. If they have physically developed to their potential and the emotional buckets are full, then they will intellectually be able to do concepts and skills with more ease later on when they're supposed to be ready for that. So we have to quickly just look. I just want to quickly double back quickly and just go and look how muscles do develop and why it's so important. Muscles also develop in a sequence. We develop generally in life from top to bottom. So the mouth, the neck, the torso, and then also from leading then onto arms and hands and fingers, arms and hands, legs and feet, and then fingers and toes. So that is like sort of the sequence how our muscles develop in the first years, and that's a very, very important sequence. And also we develop inside to outside, inside being the large muscles, the big muscles that are our core muscles, leading to our fine motor muscles outside. So if a child had too much passive learning in the younger years, or they weren't in an environment where they could play and move freely, what unfortunately happens then is that things like their pincer grasp and all that cannot develop to its potential, and then they may have problems and struggle a little bit when more symbolic learning is required, and they might need a little bit of additional help. So movement is incredibly important in the primary school years, and even ongoing. So movement is an ongoing thing, because if we stop moving, our muscles they're not developed and strong enough to their potential, and we need our muscles to keep ourselves upright so that we can sit still and concentrate and do a task to its potential. So controlled movement optimally wires the brain. And then the more movement, the more neural pathways are established. Content, so skills, content, and that kind of thing can literally be taught at any age. If the child's foundation has been an environment of many hands-on learning experiences in which they could engage on a physical level, felt good about themselves while they were in an environment conducive to learning, and had lots of movement opportunities, then they have a strong foundation on which to learn in a more formal environment at around the age of 7.
So I'm just going to add a few things that you can do for the younger kids with helping them with the movements and also with fine motor. There's a lot of Play-Doh. So to put out Play-Doh for the kids to play with, because that strengthens their muscle to be able to help their fine motor. So Play-Doh, and then scissors, the plastic scissors for the younger ones to make them cut the Play-Doh, or you can roll the Play-Doh into different shapes for them to cut. And as you're doing that, you're teaching them about shapes as well. And also a lot of threading beads. So if I have wool at home, or if I have beads that I sit and make the children make necklaces with the beads as well, that's also helps to develop their fine motor.
Brenda, what I like about your suggestions is it's all things that you readily have available at home. You don't need to spend a lot of money on buying toys. Like you said, you have your plastic containers. And even if you don't have Play-Doh, but you're making Fed Cook, that's also a dough that a child can roll out and shape. Yeah. Okay, now to my next question. And I think, Brenda, you're going to start with this one as well. How do I prepare my child for writing and reading? And then Marinda will touch on how do I prepare them for arithmetic.
Okay, so for reading, I will start with reading. To read a lot of storybooks with them. I remember when my older daughter was younger, and she liked the story of the fish. So every night we would read the fish story, and over time she started reading it on her own. Because it was repetition, she, by looking at the pictures and me repeating the story with her every day, she started reading the story on her own. So that's one of the ways that we can start helping our children with reading, is reading storybooks with them, and also reading their favorite story all the time. Another way is by reading a story and then making your children draw the characters in the story, or anything that from the story that they remember and enjoyed about the story. So drawing the story afterwards. Another way is drama. So for example, if you're doing the story on the 3 bears, then after the story, then they could act the story out. So some it could be father bear, mother bear, and baby bear, and children love that. They love acting. So also acting the story out, that also helps with reading. With writing, I would like to add a lot of activities with drawing. So at a younger age, with like I spoke about earlier on, as in the younger age, helping the children to develop their fine motors by doing a lot of activities with Play-Doh, with the beading that I had said earlier on, and also just having paper and crayon around in the house where they just have access to taking the paper. It doesn't have to be directed drawing, taking the paper and the crayons and drawing. Also in my driveway, I buy the thick chalk, and my children draw on the driveway. I put a board up on my wall at my house, a chalkboard, and the children outside, they draw on the chalkboard, and they also draw on the driveway. So that is also a lot of ways that will help with the writing.
Yes, to add to that as well, Brenda, also is to do a lot of things from left to right. So, so if you are doing like your weaving, especially when you're now initiating reading, so if you're doing your weaving, do it from left to right and focus on left to right, because obviously we read and write from left to right. So that's also a good way to do that. And then from maths, I think basically what I'm going to show you a couple of activities that I had here at home. So I didn't go and specially make them. I've had them here in my pipeline just to show you. I've like collected them over the years and done them over the years, just to give you just a few ideas of also things that you could do at home. And as Brenda was very rightfully saying, working specifically on that little pincer and on the fine motor muscles as well. So if our large motor muscles are nice and strong, they'll be able to very easily manipulate fine motor. So your good old pigs you have at home, they're absolutely wonderful, and you can just take a container and just let them pig from the side. Now if they're a younger child, like a 2-year-old, they'll probably take it with a palmer grasp like that. If their hands have been massaged lots when they are little, ironically those little 2-year-olds actually use a pincer grasp. We've noticed that specifically with babies that have come through the BabyGym Institute and whose mummies have massaged them constantly. So never ever stop massaging your baby, well, not just your baby, your child, because it shows them and teaches them where their bodies begin and where their bodies end, and it creates an awareness of where they are and how that part of their body works. So just to like I say, pigs are wonderful things. They can pig washing to the line. You can make a little line around the home. So there's many things that you can do from there. Another nice one, I probably can't see them while I haven't got my glasses on, are little tongs. So I had steel tongs here. So you don't have to have the fancy tongs. These are now the more fancy ones that actually teach you the pincer grip. These are called crocodile pincers. So these ones they hold over here, and it teaches them nicely, and then they can even turn it this way to learn to hold a pencil correctly. So they've got the nice 3-prong one like that. But you can use an ordinary prong to do this. Most of us have got a little prong around the house that they can use. You get those little ice steel ones. Like I said, I did have one lying around here somewhere. Your droppers. So you're just little general medicine droppers where they can push and get some water and then just drop. Also, you can drop from left to right. And you can do lots of counting activities that way as well, and shape activities. Like Brenda said, you're threading. You can basically thread anything. You don't have to have the fancy plastic things. You can use your cookie cutters. When you actually have a baby, the first form of threading is actually putting it on their hand and taking it off, or putting it on their hand and letting them take it off. That would be your first form of threading with the baby, and then obviously progressively becoming a little bit more harder as they get older, where they're working with little bubbles and beads. And then if you want to refine that pincer grasp, you can look at what you have around your house. Maybe you have this little 10 toy game. Some of us have it. It's like the tic-tac-toe. These work very well, because to take them from a palmer grasp to a pincer grasp, holding a handful of them in your hand, in your palm, and then manipulating the fingers so that they're holding them between the pincers over there. So that's a lovely one. And then they can either place it inside, or you can put it into a container, just any regular container to count. And once again, bring your shapes and your colors and everything else in that way. Another nice one is your spice bottles. So I'm sure most of us with load shedding that we've experienced, we all have matches around the house. So for the little ones, you can just take their heads off, and please do remember it's supervised play. And you can literally, depending on your spice bottles, you can color code them, and then let them put like the color code your matchsticks as well. Use Cokies or crayons or whatever you have lying around. You don't have to go and buy anything fancy. And then literally they're going to thread. Okay, I've lost, oh yes, the bottom. So literally then they can either put things in the holes at the top, which is very good hand-eye coordination, as well as, like I say, they can mix it with the color. So if you are lucky to have spice bottles that are color-coded, you can use those. Otherwise, make your own stickers or a little line of permanent marker or something and match it up. Another nice way to do matching, which is matching and sorting, is to take photos on your phone. So if you want to bring the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional in, take photos on your phone of their favorite toys. And you can literally show them the picture on your phone and ask them to find the toy in a pile of 4 or 5 or 6 items. So, and that way you can bring counting in as well. So it really does not need to cost you any money. Use Dad's shoelaces for threading. You don't need to go and have the big fancy ones. You just use Dad's shoelaces at his tackies. He's not going anywhere right now anyhow. So that's fine too. If you've got beads, so maybe you have beads at home, you can do that same tic-tac-toe thing with beads or with buttons. Whatever you have, go look in your needlework box. You might actually be very surprised as to what you have in there. So never ever limit it. It's as far, you can use literally anything. It's as far as your imagination will allow you to go. Another wonderful game to introduce counting as well as colors, and that is a twister. So this is the twister. This is a different twister mat. My kids have got the twister mat somewhere in the house, but that's a different one. But that's a lovely one just for them to use their whole body, and you can focus either on colors or you can focus on shapes. You don't have to necessarily use it the way it was intended. So try and start thinking about using things in a different way to what it was originally intended. That helps a lot as well. And then like if you want to do simple weaving activities, now going more to grade R, 4 or 5-year-old grade R, you can do things. Just remember, like I say, always start on the left and work to the right. And then they can do simple weaving activities. You do not need to have fancy colorful paper like I have here. You can cut out a cereal box if you have a cereal box, or a Jungle Oats box, or you can literally use anything. You can obviously, if it's under supervision, you can cut it as far as your imagination will allow you to go. You can cut a packet if you want to for the strips, and use an old cardboard box to do the weaving. The possibilities are limitless. Just a few other ideas maybe for writing is if you cut them out. Now, what I did was, the best thing that ever happened to me was when I was still teaching in formal education, and my principal didn't permit us to photocopy. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I had to really think out the box about things. And she was right. So we had to think of, when we were doing something on a more symbolic level, we had to think of different ways to do it. So we often made mini templates where the kids would learn then to trace the template, cut out the templates, and it didn't have to be perfect because we're practicing. And then like here now it was circles. So these were now older children that are already drawing circles, because drawing first begins with scribbles and then it goes to circles, and then it develops from there depending on their body perception. And the more you massage your child, especially the outline of their body, the more aware of their body they become. So it's a very good activity to also follow through at home. And then, of course, you can just follow on to all the more fun things that does perceptual skills. So foreground, background. I've got another nice one here that did up and down. So literally let their bodies move. So let them climb up a chair and climb down a chair, obviously under supervision. And then if you want to now in the grade R, you take it to a more formal activity, or a paper-driven activity, if I can put it that way. Don't know how well you can see. I'm trying to hold up here. This was a tree. Oh, I just lost my man. Anyhow, this is a ladder. And then he came through the ladder here, and he went up the ladder, and he went down the ladder. So that's just another, like I say, it's limitless. You don't have to, it's not about just doing worksheets and workbooks. Because to tell you the honest truth, the child's going to find more value in doing something physically and then doing something like on a piece of paper, almost in an arty form, than what they will just completing a worksheet or coloring in a picture about the same concept. So those are the kind of things you just need to start to think differently about.
Yes, and with everybody who hoarded toilet paper, they have nice little rolls that they can cut out and play with. Okay, so how will my preschool child's social development be influenced if I decide to home educate? Won't my child miss out on group singing, the learning of rhymes, and playground games?
Child will never miss out because research indicates that a child learns best from somebody that they love. So the home and parents are far more important to the overall well-being and development of a child than what any formal environment could be. Because at home already, they learn to engage, they learn to take turns, they learn to wait, they learn to stop, they learn to be part of the pecking order, right, in their own homes with their own families, and especially now more so now during lockdown time. Home-educated children also often mix with adults and children of various ages, and research has also indicated that home-educated children often are able to better engage in conversation with people of all ages, and not only their peer group. For the under 3-year-old, of course, they don't really need that social interaction because at this phase, it is all about me. And it's how my body works and me do and I can. So it isn't about others. So it's a very selfish period, but it's a very necessary period because if we don't have a strong essence of who we are as little people, and that happens specifically in the first 3 years, then we aren't able to really engage with others properly on a social level if we don't really feel comfortable with who we are and feel comfortable in our own skins. So currently, also during our time now, I find that also with my children, if I can use my children as an example, they've really missed having their friends. So don't think because you're home educating, now I know Brenda can reiterate this, and you and Nell, don't think that because you home educate, you don't mix. In fact, since we've begun home educating, our social life has boomed. We never had the social life we had because there wasn't time to really, yes, you saw your friends at school, your kids saw their friends at school, but it's not the same. It's not the same as in a home education environment. So my children have really, really been battling during this lockdown period with not seeing their friends. So online resources have been wonderful because we've been able to do video calling and that kind of thing. Online togetherness could also work if you're far away or like isolated on a farm. You can have online. It's not the same as touching, but it's better than nothing. And so my children have also been engaging like with PE with Joe. He's a British teacher. And it's amazing. And they get very excited about the 9,000 other people that are online at the same time, live streaming with Joe. So that's been great. And of course, what's worked very well for us in the home education community is co-ops and moms getting together in groups, where our children then are doing problem solving together, they're doing group work together, they're doing debating, they're doing orals, and they're doing talks. So they have basically the best of both worlds. And we feel very blessed to be able to do that.
Now, if I decide to make use of the services of a curriculum provider, what should I look for in the program? And how do I decide if it is a good program?
Honestly, if we're looking at the preschool year specifically and people are looking for ideas, look at the new Birth to 5 curriculum. Well, it's Birth to 4 curriculum. They've got some good ideas there. Footprints on our land, Shirley's ABC 1 to 3. I've looked at that program as well. It really has some amazing hands-on ideas. And then also look at the Montessori approach as well as the Charlotte Mason pathways as well. All those will get you on the right track and prepare you for the future.
I think you've given so many good ideas and hands-on things that we can easily do with our children to stimulate them and help them develop. Thank you very much for your valuable input.